Morning in the Colorado mountains carried a silence so deep it felt almost sacred. Mist hung heavy over the dry fields, turning the valley into a monochrome engraving. In the distance, the Rockies stood solemn under the pale light, their peaks dusted with the season's first snow. In the middle of that stillness lay Reed Ranch, a stretch of faded wooden fences, a low stable with smoke curling from the chimney, and a solitary man walking through the cold wind. Sam Reed. He was leading a gray mare back to the stable, his gloved hand rubbing her neck. The animal exhaled a white puff, nudging her head against his shoulder as if asking for reassurance. "It's all right, Luna," he murmured, his voice rough but gentle. "The wind's stronger than last year." Luna flicked her ears as if she understood. Sam's lips curved faintly, a rare smile, so fleeting that even he didn't realize it had happened. Hey, Soul Stories fam! We're about to begin a brand new love journey. Please comment on where you're watching from so we can see that our Soul Stories family is all around the world. The ranch had once belonged to his grandfather, a true Western man who lived by his hands and his pride. Sam had grown up hundreds of miles away in San Francisco, surrounded by glass towers and boardrooms colder than the fog. He'd once thought he would never come back. But fate has a way of dragging people home to the places they least expect. 3 years ago, Sam had been the young CEO of Reed Tech, a billion-dollar tech firm known for the AI security system he'd built from scratch. The press called him the man redefining cybersecurity. Investors praised him. The media adored him. He had everything but power, money, influence, and above all, an unshakable faith that his younger brother Nathan would always have his back. Until the day he discovered Nathan had secretly conspired with the board, using the excuse of stabilizing the company to oust him from his own creation. It was the perfect betrayal. No guns, no knives, just a few sheets of paper, a few signatures, and a smile he would never forget. That day, Sam walked out of the gleaming skyscraper in downtown San Francisco while the city pulsed with life around him. Sunlight glared off the glass, but inside him, everything was dark. He sold his shares, withdrew from the world he once believed was everything, and vanished from the financial map. 3 years had passed. Now he lived alone in the mountains, on the inherited land that had once been his grandfather's. Mornings were for feeding the horses, afternoons for mending fences, evenings for rereading old books by the glow of a single yellow lamp. No phone, no news, no investors calling, only silence, and he had grown used to it. But that morning, the kitchen cupboard held only a few cans of beans, half a bag of coffee, and a bit of oatmeal. Sam knew he couldn't avoid going into town any longer. He hated that, not because the people were unkind, but because of their eyes. Curious, speculative, trying to remember where they'd seen him before. He slipped his wallet into his jacket, pulled on a cap, and stepped outside. His silver Ford F-150, its paint long faded, sat under the pines. The engine rumbled to life, breaking the morning stillness. The road from the ranch to Whispering Pines wound down the hillside past scattered cabins and weathered signs. Snowflakes drifted lazily, dusting the evergreens like salt. Sam drove slowly, his gaze steady on the familiar view. On the radio, an old country song played softly. "You can't outrun your heart forever." He turned it off. About 30 minutes later, he reached town. Whispering Pines had only one main street, 2 rows of red brick buildings, a church, and a small cafe that always kept its open sign lit. At the far end hung a worn sign, Holcomb's Market. Groceries, hardware, and coffee beans since 1958. Sam parked in front. He wasn't planning to stay long, just stock up for winter and leave. The bell jingled when he pushed open the door. The smell of roasted coffee and warm wood filled the air, softening the chill outside. "Morning," called Harold Holcomb, the shop owner, from behind the counter. He was in his 60s with silver hair, thick glasses, and the kind eyes of a man who'd never left the mountains. "Morning," Sam replied quietly. His voice carried the rough calm of someone who hadn't spoken much in years. "What can I get you, son?" "Flour, sugar, coffee, and some oats, and a few salt blocks for the horse." "Ah, stocking up for winter, huh?" "Snow's coming early this year." Sam nodded. "You're up at the Reed place, right?" Harold asked while filling the order. "I remember your granddad." "Good man. You living there alone?" "Yeah. Not easy, that life." "Not what I wanted," Sam said, "but it's what I needed." Harold smiled softly and didn't press further. Sam wandered through the aisles, scanning the shelves. Jars of jam, boxes of cereal, a broom hanging beside nails and screws. Ordinary things. So plain they felt peaceful. This was the world he'd chosen. Simple, honest, without meetings or masks or lies. And then the quiet was shattered. A woman's voice screamed from outside, "Let go of me, Mr. Tillman!" The tone was firm but trembling, followed by the sound of scuffling. A thud, something falling. Harold's head snapped up, frowning. "Oh, Lord, not again." "What's going on?" Sam asked, glancing toward the window. "Frank Tillman," Harold muttered. "Local real estate shark. Someone has been trying to buy up half the town for some fancy resort. Miss Emma Whitaker, the school teacher, won't sell. He's been threatening her for weeks." "What about the police?" Harold shrugged. "Sheriff Dawson won't touch Tillman. He's in the town council's pocket. Around here, whoever's got money's got the law." Sam said nothing. He'd seen men like Tillman before, in boardrooms, on magazine covers, even in his own brother. Men who thought everything had a price, including people. He had no intention of getting involved, but the next cry stopped him cold. "You're hurting me." Sam set the coffee bag on the counter. "Hold my stuff for me, Harold." And he stepped outside. Across the street, in the middle of the snow-covered sidewalk, a young woman with light brown hair was trying to pull her arm free from a large man's grip. Her papers and shopping bags were scattered across the ground. "Let go!" she snapped through clenched teeth. "I'm not signing anything." "You don't have a choice, Emma," Frank barked. "Your father owed me, and I have the right to claim it back through the land." Her eyes blazed. "You were already paid. I don't owe you a damn thing." "You don't understand how contracts work," Frank sneered. "Just sign, and I'll let you be." Sam approached, his footsteps slow and deliberate. "She said no." His voice was low, but carried enough weight to make both turn. Frank narrowed his eyes. "And who the hell are you?" "Someone who knows when enough's enough." Frank gave a cold laugh. "Stay out of it. This is between me and Miss Whitaker." Sam glanced at Frank's meaty hand clutching Emma's wrist, then looked up, his eyes like steel. "Between you? Looks to me like it's happening in the middle of Main Street." Frank didn't release her. "You know who I am?" "No, and I don't care." A few townspeople had stopped to watch. The tension thickened. Sam didn't raise his voice or move closer, but the calm danger in his stance made Frank hesitate. Finally, the man let go, his jaw tight. "You'll regret this, cowboy." "Try me." Frank glared, then turned and stormed off, his breath steaming in the cold. The woman bent to gather her things. Sam knelt to help, picking up papers buried in the snow. Their hands brushed, her skin cold but soft, carrying a faint scent of soap. "Thank you," she said, still catching her breath. "I don't know who you are, but thank you." "It's nothing," Sam replied quietly. "No one should have to fight alone." She looked at him more closely, curiosity flickering in her eyes. "You new around here?" "I've never seen you before." "Just passing through." "Well then, thank you, stranger passing through." Sam gave a brief nod, handing her the damp papers. "Keep those safe, and if he comes back, don't be alone." "You think I'm scared?" "No, I think you're smart enough to know when to ask for help." Their eyes met for a second. The wind picked up, carrying tiny flakes between them. Emma smiled faintly, though her lips were still trembling. "What's your name?" "Doesn't matter," Sam said, soft but firm. "I won't be staying." He turned away, heading back toward the store. She watched him go, standing motionless in the snow, clutching her crumpled papers. When Sam returned to the counter, Harold peered at him over his glasses. "You just picked a fight with the biggest troublemaker in town." Sam's tone was flat. "Didn't pick a fight, just didn't like what I saw." Harold chuckled. "You're just like your granddad, stubborn, but with a good heart." Sam said nothing. He gathered his supplies, paid, and walked back to the truck. The sky had turned a dull gray, promising more snow. He opened the door but paused, glancing down the street. Emma Whitaker stood outside a small bookstore, her hair loose in the wind, her coat too thin for the cold, her eyes lowered to the wet papers in her hands. Something in that image made him stop. Not pity, something quieter, stranger, something he hadn't let himself feel in years. He suddenly remembered what his grandfather once told him. Some people don't need saving, Sam, but when you help them, sometimes you're the one who gets saved. He shook the thought off, slammed the door, and started the engine. The sound echoed through the quiet street, fading into the white curtain of snow. But even after his truck disappeared down the road, Emma remained there, watching. And inside Sam, the man who had once sworn never to care about anyone again, something small, almost imperceptible, began to stir. A spark of warmth in the coldest winter of his life. The rain came suddenly in the late afternoon, carrying with it a chill that slipped through every narrow street of Whispering Pines. Heavy drops drummed against the roof of Sam's pickup truck, creating a rhythmic, almost soothing beat. He didn't mind the rain, but when the mountain road leading up to his ranch flooded, the small wooden bridge became too slick to cross safely. He pulled over in front of a dimly lit wooden sign that glowed under a yellow porch light. Perkins Inn. Warm beds, home meals, honest people. He'd passed it a few times before, but had never gone inside. The doorbell jingled as Sam stepped in, and warmth instantly wrapped around him, sweeping away the scent of wet earth. The space was small but cozy. Light pine walls, a blazing fireplace, and the sweet smell of apple pie drifting through the air. "Well, good evening, stranger," a woman's voice called out. Martha Perkins, the innkeeper, appeared from behind the counter. She was in her 60s, plump and cheerful, her silver hair pinned neatly at the nape of her neck. Her smile was as bright as the firelight that melted the cold from the room. "Out on the mountain roads in weather like this?" "The road to the ranch is washed out," Sam replied, his voice low. "I just need a room for the night." "Well, I've got plenty of rooms, and dinner's just been served. Beef stew and fresh bread. You'd be crazy to turn it down." A small smile touched Sam's lips, rare, almost hesitant. "If there's a portion left, I won't refuse." "There's always a portion for everyone here," Mrs. Perkins said with a wink, handing him a key. "Room 5, down the hall. But before you sleep, stop by the dining room. I don't let anyone eat alone." The dining room glowed warmly, the air filled with the scent of firewood and stew. A long pine table, covered with a checkered cloth and mismatched china, stood at the center. The kind of table that made you feel like you'd stumbled into someone's home rather than an inn. Sam took a seat at one end, removed his coat, and ran a hand through his damp hair. Outside, the wind howled through the cracks, and the rain tapped against the windows. A familiar, lonely kind of music. He was just lifting his spoon when the door burst open. A rush of cold air swept in, carrying the smell of rain, and a silhouette. "Good heavens, Emma! You're soaked through," Mrs. Perkins exclaimed from behind the counter. Sam looked up. His eyes met the woman's. Emma Whitaker. The same teacher he'd stepped in to help that morning when Frank Tillman had tried to force her hand. Now in the glow of the firelight, she looked different. Her hair clung wetly to her cheeks, her brown coat dark with rain. But her expression held that same unshaken calm. "The bus got stuck. I walked the last half mile," Emma explained, her voice hoarse from the cold. Mrs. Perkins tisked and hurried over. "You'll catch pneumonia, child. Go take a hot shower. I'll reheat your dinner." "Thank you, Mrs. Perkins." When Emma returned to the dining room a few minutes later, she stopped short. Sam was still there. Surprise flickered across her face, then softened into a faint smile. "Small world," she said quietly. "Sometimes smaller than we like," Sam replied, his tone dry, but his eyes carried the trace of something unspoken, almost like a smile that never fully surfaced. They sat across from each other, the only sounds the crackle of the fire and the steady rhythm of rain outside. Mrs. Perkins placed 2 steaming bowls of stew in front of them, along with golden slices of bread. "Eat up, you two. You look like you came straight out of the same storm," she said with a grin, then more playfully, "and like 2 people who don't realize how much they need a friend." Emma laughed softly while Sam stayed silent. Oh, don't tease, Emma said, her cheeks tinting pink. Tease? Honey, I've lived long enough to recognize that look in someone's eyes, Mrs. Perkins replied, chuckling as she returned to her mending. You still live in town? Sam asked after a while. More like live here for now, Emma replied, stirring her spoon idly. Mrs. Perkins is letting me stay until I figure things out. The bank's reassessing my house. If I can't make the payment in 2 months, they'll take it. Sam set his spoon down. His eyes darkened. How much? 25,000. She said it lightly, almost as if it were weather talk, but her tone carried exhaustion. My father passed away and left the debt behind. He thought he could restart his woodworking shop, but believed the wrong man. Believed Frank Tillman. And now Tillman's trying to take your house. Yes, he has a way of making everyone owe him something. Sam looked toward the window where rain streaked down the glass. He knew that feeling. Betrayal by someone you once trusted completely. Except in his case, it bore his own last name, Reed. You don't have anyone else? Emma smiled faintly. No. My mother died when I was 16. My father was all I had. Now it's just me, my students, and that little patch of land. You could leave, Sam said quietly. Find work somewhere else. With your teaching degree, you'd be fine. No. She lifted her head, eyes clear and steady. That's my home. I teach at the town school. Those kids need me, and I need to believe there's still something in this world that can't be bought. Sam held her gaze for a long moment before nodding slowly. That's a good reason. Dinner lingered unhurriedly. Conversation grew naturally between them. Quiet, thoughtful. Emma talked about her students, children who came to class in torn boots but with radiant smiles. She told him how she taught them to write thank you letters to townsfolk, just to remind people that gratitude still exists. Sam listened, occasionally asking a question. He rarely spoke of himself, but sometimes in the quiet pauses, there was a weight in his eyes that said more than words. When their talk drifted toward his past, he hesitated. I served in the military for a few years, he finally said, before I went into business. War teaches you two things, how to survive and how to be alone. Emma grew thoughtful. I think loneliness is a kind of war, too. Just one without winners. He looked at her, surprised. Such a simple sentence, yet true in a way that struck deep. You talk like someone who's seen a lot. Maybe. I've believed in good things, and I've seen them fall apart. They both laughed softly then, not because anything was funny, but because in that quiet moment, they recognized something familiar in each other. By the fireplace, Mrs. Perkins sat darning a tablecloth, sneaking satisfied glances at the pair as though she were watching a favorite movie scene. You're not afraid Tillman will come after you again? Sam asked once they'd finished eating. Of course I'm afraid, Emma admitted, but fear doesn't fix anything. I just hope next time I won't have to face it alone. Sam didn't answer, but his steady look said enough. Later that night, the rain hadn't stopped. They both paused in the hallway, warm light spilling from the wall lamps onto faces that looked worn yet at peace. Thank you, Emma said quietly. Not just for this morning, for tonight too. Don't mention it. You know, she continued, her voice barely above a whisper, in this town, not many people are willing to stand with me. You should probably leave before you get caught up in my mess. He gave a dry half smile. I've lived among worse people than these. Trust me, a small-town bully doesn't scare me. Her smile widened slightly. Genuine this time. Then, good night, stranger who always shows up at the right moment. Good night, stubborn schoolteacher. Emma let out a quiet laugh before turning down the dim corridor. Sam stood still, listening to her footsteps fade into the rhythm of the rain. There was something in his chest. Not pity, not desire, but a kind of warmth he hadn't felt in years. In his room, Sam sat by the window. The streetlight outside flickered through the rain, casting his shadow softly against the wall. He thought of Emma's eyes, strong, brave, but carrying a loneliness he knew all too well. He had seen that same look staring back at him in the mirror ever since the day his world collapsed. Maybe Mrs. Perkins was right. There were two people who didn't realize how much they needed a friend. Sam exhaled slowly and drew the curtain closed. Outside, the rain kept falling, But inside him, for the first time in years, something was beginning to melt. A beginning, quiet and unhurried, in the heart of a rainy night. Night fell over whispering pines like a heavy blanket laid across the small mountain town. The rain had stopped, but moisture still clung to the air, making the wind through the pine trees sound like endless whispers. In his upstairs room at the Perkins Inn, Sam Reed sat by the window, staring out at the empty road, his hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. Sleep had been a stranger to him lately, not because of work or money, but because of the ghosts that still surfaced now and then. A boardroom full of cold faces, the cutting silence of his younger brother, the ink on a betrayal he couldn't forget. But tonight felt different. There was something in the air, a faint unease that pricked at the edges of his awareness. His instincts, honed by too many years of keeping himself alive, told him something was off. Then came the pounding. Thud! 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 3 hard knocks on the front door, followed by a shout, slurred, angry, echoing through the rain-slick street. "Emma! I know you're in there! Open up, you worthless thief!" The voice was rough, soaked in liquor. Frank Tillman. Sam set the cup down sharply and strode out of his room. Downstairs, the weak glow from the fireplace flickered across the worn floorboards. Mrs. Perkins had just appeared in the kitchen doorway, her face pale, one trembling hand clutching her apron. "Oh, Lord, it's him again!" "Sam, don't go out there!" But Sam was already moving. He unlatched the door and stepped onto the porch. The night air hit him, cold and sharp. Under the porch light, Frank swayed on his feet, eyes bloodshot, a half-empty bottle hanging from his fist. "You should go home," Sam said quietly, voice steady but edged like steel. Frank sneered. "And who the hell are you to tell me what to do? That woman owes me, and I'll take what's mine, by dirt or by blood." Sam didn't move. He stood squarely in front of the door. "She said no. I think you should listen to her." The words were calm, but the look in Sam's eyes made the drunk man hesitate, just for a heartbeat. Frank barked a laugh, voice rasping. "You've got guts, I'll give you that." "You don't even know who I am." "Don't need to," Sam replied. "I just know you're disturbing people in the middle of the night." A long, heavy silence fell. Then Frank stepped back, muttered a curse, and jabbed a shaking finger at him. "Fine, but you'll regret this. You and her both." He turned, stumbling toward his old pickup truck. The headlights flared, cutting a harsh yellow beam across the wet gravel. The engine coughed, then roared to life. A moment later, he was gone, leaving only the sour stench of liquor and exhaust in his wake. Mrs. Perkins exhaled shakily and came up beside Sam. "Good heavens! I thought he was going to break down the door." Sam kept his gaze on the empty road. "He'll be back." "You think so?" "I know the type. When a man like that loses control, he tries to get it back, no matter the cost." On the staircase behind them, Emma Whitaker appeared. She wore a thin sweater, her hair loose and tangled, her face pale as porcelain. "Is he gone?" she asked softly. "For now." "Lock your door," Sam said. "I'll stay downstairs." "You don't have to." "Yes," he interrupted gently. "I do." "I wasn't sleeping anyway." Their eyes met briefly. In that fleeting look, between fear and gratitude, something wordless passed. A fragile trust, born in the quiet after danger. By morning, sunlight painted the distant ridges in muted gold. The town stirred slowly, as if waking from a troubled dream. But the tension inside Sam didn't ease. He was loading supplies into his truck when Sheriff Dawson pulled up in his old Jeep, stepping out with the slow weariness of a man who'd seen too much of the same kind of trouble. "Heard there was some excitement last night," Dawson said, voice low. "Nothing serious," Sam replied. "Frank was drunk. Said a few things." Dawson's gray eyes narrowed. "Frank Tillman's not just some drunk. He's got family on the town council, money and friends in the wrong places. Crossing him is asking for trouble." Sam tightened his grip on the strap of his duffel bag. "I just did what anyone should, protected someone being threatened. That's not wrong." "It is," Dawson said quietly, "if the person you're protecting is Emma Whitaker." Sam frowned. Dawson sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. She's a good woman, but tangled up with Frank, she's like a lit fuse. You humiliated him last night. He'll come for payback. The sheriff hesitated, then added in a lower tone, if you're smart, son, you'll get out of town. Before he sobers up and remembers exactly what happened. When Dawson's Jeep disappeared down the road, Sam stood there for a long time, the morning air still and cold around him. The silence pressed against his ribs. Leaving, that was what he'd promised himself when he came to Whispering Pines. To stay away from people, from loyalty, from pain. He had no reason to stay, and yet he could still see Emma's face from last night, pale in the porch light, her voice trembling like the edge of a leaf in the wind. Sam exhaled. He knew himself too well. He wasn't the kind of man who could walk away from danger when someone needed him. Later that morning, he stopped by the small coffee shop across from the market. He was halfway through his order when Harold Holcomb, the owner of the general store, waved him over. Reed, heard about what happened with Tillman. You'd better watch your back. I know, Sam said curtly. Harold leaned closer, lowering his voice. Listen, I don't want to meddle, but Tillman was in here not half an hour ago. Bought 3 jerry cans of gasoline and a new rope. Sam froze. A chill ran down his spine. What did you say? Gas and rope, Harold repeated grimly. Kept muttering something about making things right and taking back what's his. Sounded bad, Sam. That was all he needed to hear. Sam set his coffee on the counter, threw a few bills down, and headed for the door. Reed! Where are you going? Harold called after him. Sam didn't stop. Where I should have stayed last night, he said over his shoulder. The door slammed behind him. Moments later, the growl of his truck engine cut through the morning stillness, fading into the wind. He didn't need confirmation, didn't need proof. His gut screamed the truth. Emma Whitaker was in danger. Night settled over Whispering Pines, wrapped in a thin veil of mist like a damp shawl. Up on the hill, the old wooden house where Emma Whitaker was staying glowed faintly through the fog. From a distance, it looked like a small island adrift in a sea of darkness. Inside, Emma sat by the fireplace, a book trembling slightly in her hands as the flames flickered. The house was quiet, so quiet that even the sound of a page turning seemed too loud. Mrs. Perkins had gone home early. Sam had driven back to the ranch to check on the stables before nightfall. Emma thought the evening would finally be peaceful. After days of storms and trouble, she believed the chaos had passed. She was wrong. Crash! The sharp sound of shattering glass ripped through the stillness. A rock slammed through the window, scattering glittering shards like rain. Emma gasped and stumbled back. The cold wind rushed in, bringing with it the acrid smell of gasoline. Before she could make sense of what was happening, the door burst open. Sam charged inside, breathing hard, eyes sweeping the room. Get down! He pulled her away from the window, pressing her against the wooden wall near the fireplace. Glass kept falling around them like icy rain. You knew this was coming, she stammered. I figured Frank wouldn't stop, Sam said grimly, but I didn't think he'd move this fast. He leaned forward, peeking through the torn curtain. Headlights glared across the wooden gate. 3 shadowy figures stood outside in the fog, one of them swaying unsteadily. Sam recognized that drunken stance anywhere. Frank Tillman. Another man held a crowbar, the third a bottle of liquor. Their muffled laughter cut through the night like gravel. Come out, school teacher, Frank bellowed. Think some hero's gonna save you? Or are you hiding behind a man's apron strings again? Emma's hands clenched into fists, fury and fear twisting inside her chest. Sam turned to her, voice low and steady. They're trying to scare you. I'll deal with it. Stay here. You're going out there? I have to. If I don't, they'll throw something worse next time, maybe fire. Sam stood, pulling the handgun from his holster. The steel gleamed in the firelight. He unlocked the door slowly, his tone turning cold. Stay inside, no matter what. But as he stepped out onto the porch, Emma rose too. Her heart pounded so loud it drowned the rain. Her eyes landed on the old shotgun hanging on the wall, her father's. She hesitated, then reached for it, her fingers trembling against the worn barrel. She hadn't held it since the day he died. But his voice echoed in her memory. There are moments when you have to be stronger than your fear, even if it's just once. Outside, Sam faced the three men. The moonlight broke through the mist, half illuminating his face. Calm, hard, unreadable. "Kind of late for a visit, isn't it?" he said quietly. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the air like steel. Frank smirked. "I just came to talk to the little teacher inside. You don't need to get involved. She's not talking to you." "Leave." The biggest man stepped forward, gripping the crowbar. "Who do you think you are? You don't make the rules around here." Sam didn't blink. Click. He cocked the gun, pointing it low but steady. His tone sharpened. "Take one more step, and I'll assume you volunteered." The air thickened. The wind hissed through the dry leaves, swirling them across the dirt road. Frank hesitated, faltering for the first time, but pride kept his voice bitter. "You'll regret this, Reed. In this town, no one crosses me and walks away easily." Just then, the door creaked open behind him. Emma stepped out into the night. Her hair whipped in the wind, and in her hands was her father's shotgun. The light from inside the house caught her face, pale with cold but fierce with resolve. "Enough, Frank." Her voice wasn't loud, but it was sharp enough to slice through the fog. "I've had enough of you. Leave now, before I forget I'm a teacher." The men froze. Frank gave a short, forced laugh, but it faltered when he saw how she held the gun. Not clumsy, not trembling anymore. Sam glanced sideways at her, a flicker of surprise and pride crossing his face. He took half a step closer, shoulder to shoulder with her, his gun still angled low. "You've got good timing," he murmured. "You didn't really think I'd let you play hero alone, did you?" Emma replied without looking away from the gate. Frank cursed under his breath and kicked at the fence. "Fine, have it your way, but you two better watch your backs. I'll be back, and next time, nothing's gonna stop me." His truck roared to life, tires spinning mud across the path, before disappearing into the dark. The other two men scrambled after him, leaving the gate trembling in the wind. The wooden door shut behind them, sealing the night out, leaving only the lingering smell of gasoline and gun smoke. Emma dropped the shotgun onto the table and exhaled shakily. Sam reached out, resting a steady hand on her shoulder. A silent thank you. "You did well," he said softly. She looked up at him, eyes still trembling, but strong. "I just did what I had to." He nodded. "Yeah, maybe keep that gun closer next time." "You think there'll be a next time?" Sam's gaze drifted to the window, where the moon was breaking through the clouds. "With a man like Frank Tillman," he said quietly, "there's always a next time." Outside, the night wind carried away the last trace of gasoline. Inside, the firelight flickered against two shadows, one of a man who had once run from the world, and one of a woman who had once been afraid within her own walls. Now they both knew. The fight wasn't over, but tonight at least they had stood on the same side. The night wind had quieted. Only the soft hum of crickets drifted from the fields, mingling with the faint scent of freshly cut wood. The broken window had been patched with a temporary plank. The shards of glass were swept neatly to the corner. The glow from an oil lamp cast a gentle amber light across the small living room, wrapping the house in a fragile warmth after a night that had almost unraveled it. Emma sat on the chair, hands clasped tightly together. Her hair was still tousled from the storm. A thin scratch marked her cheek where a shard of glass had caught her. She didn't notice. Her whole body was tense, coiled like a string stretched too far. Sam hammered the last nail into place, then stepped back and wiped the sweat from his forehead. "That should do it," he said quietly. "I'll come back in the morning and put in new glass." "No need," Emma replied quickly. "I can handle it." He studied her for a moment, the corner of his mouth lifting faintly. "You sound just like I used to." "Used to?" "Yeah," he said, smiling, a tired, bittersweet curve of the lips. "When everything fell apart, I thought I just had to fix it on my own, that I didn't need anyone. But I learned, sometimes you can't patch the broken pieces alone." Emma's hands tightened. Her eyes glinted with a wary pride. "I've already lost a home once because of the wrong kind of help. I don't take charity, Sam." He stepped closer, his voice low but firm. "It's not charity. It's a debt I'm repaying, in a way that matters, because I know what it's like to be cornered." She rose abruptly. You don't understand. That debt was my father's mistake. If I let someone else pay it, it's just another way of losing control of my life. Emma, you saved me last night, and I'm grateful. But money, don't get involved. Silence swallowed the room. The lamplight painted her face in golden shadow, making her look both fierce and heartbreakingly fragile. Sam stood there, arms folded, leaning against the wall. You call it pride, he said quietly, but sometimes pride is just fear wearing a stronger mask. Her eyes flashed. What did you just say? You're afraid to accept help, afraid of owing anyone, afraid of looking weak. I get it. I've been there. But living that way doesn't make you strong. It just makes you tired. Her voice trembled but held steady. At least I still have my dignity. Sam exhaled slowly, not arguing. He walked to the table, set the hammer down, and said softly, Dignity won't matter much if the bank takes your house. Emma bit her lip. I'll find a way. I'll sell what I can, take extra teaching hours, whatever it takes. And if that's still not enough, then I lose everything. But at least it'll be my mistake. Her voice cracked, but her eyes, bright, determined, didn't waver. And in that defiance, Sam saw himself years ago, the man standing in a glass office, refusing every offer of help, watching his company crumble because his pride hurt worse than failure. After a long silence, he spoke again, his tone gentler. All right, I won't push, but hear me out. Emma nodded faintly, though her expression stayed guarded. This isn't pity, Emma. It's an investment. She frowned. An investment? Yes, not in land or property, in people. He gave a soft, hoarse laugh. I've lost millions betting on the wrong ones. Maybe this time, I just want to try believing in the right one. She looked down, her fingers curling around each other. If you accept, I won't ask for anything. No interest, no conditions. Think of it as me putting my faith in you. Someone who can stand up with nothing but her own strength. She deserves a chance to start over. Emma didn't speak. The light flickered across her face, highlighting the quiet conflict in her eyes. No anger now, just the exhaustion of someone torn between pride and need. Finally, she said softly, Sam, do you know what's worst about pride? What? It makes you reject good things, just because you were hurt once. The words landed gently, but they pierced deep. Sam didn't answer. He only sat down, rubbing his temples. So what will you do? He asked after a moment. Keep going, she said. I can still teach. I'll pay off the debt, even if it takes years. I just need time. He looked at her, stubborn, beautiful in her quiet resolve, and smiled faintly. You're impossible. She smiled back, a small, tired curve. So are you. They both laughed, softly, wearily, but real. The kind of laughter that cracks through the heaviness of two people who've been carrying too much for too long. Outside, the wind picked up again, making the patch door creak against its hinges. Sam checked it once more, securing the latch. When he turned back, he caught her watching him. Thank you, she said at last, her tone gentler than before. Not just for the window? Then for what? For staying. Anyone else would have walked away by now. He held her gaze. Someone once stayed for me when I didn't deserve it. Maybe this is how I pay that debt forward. Emma didn't answer. She just sat quietly, looking at the boarded window. The lamplight made her eyes look softer, distant, but warm. A long silence stretched between them. Sam thought about speaking, then decided against it. Between them hung something unseen, a thin, fragile thread of connection that neither dared to pull too hard, afraid it might break. He looked around the room, then said lightly, Tomorrow I'll bring proper glass. And maybe some real coffee instead of Mrs. Perkins's motor oil. Emma's lips curved. You really think I'd let you pay for coffee? Fine. You brew, I buy. It was nothing, just words, but they lingered in the air like something more, something that softened the edges of the night, that eased the loneliness sitting quietly in both their chests. And for the first time in a long while, the house didn't feel empty. It felt shared. Morning settled over whispering pines beneath a heavy gray sky, as if the whole town were holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The first winter wind carried the scent of pine and wood smoke from the houses scattered along the slope. It brushed past the porch where Sam was stacking leftover planks and nails into the back of his truck. He needed to return to the ranch. The horses had to be fed, and the mountain roads would soon start to freeze. But every time he turned toward the small wooden house behind him, where Emma stood by the window, hands wrapped around a mug of tea, eyes still clouded with exhaustion, something in him faltered. "The window's secure now," he said, closing the truck bed. "I'll be back once I get new glass." "You don't have to," Emma replied calmly, though she avoided his gaze. "I can call a handyman from town." "And Frank?" Sam asked bluntly. "You think he'll stop?" She didn't answer. Her fingers tightened around the mug. They both knew Frank Tillman was still walking free, protected by relatives on the town council. One drunken night was all it would take for everything to happen again. Sam crossed his arms, leaning against the truck. "You should press charges. Take this to court. I can help. Gather evidence. Find a lawyer." Emma shook her head. "I can't afford that. And I don't want to get dragged into something that ugly." "You can't just sit here waiting for him to do it again." "You deserve peace, Emma." She looked up at him then, her voice soft but steady. "Peace isn't something I can buy, Sam." He stepped closer, his tone low and sincere. "If you won't go to court, then come with me. To the ranch. Just for a few days, until things calm down. I won't feel right leaving you here alone." Her brow furrowed. "Me? At your ranch? There's plenty of space. Guest room, stable, quiet all around. No one will bother you there." He paused, his eyes unwavering. "Better that than waiting here for another rock through the window." Emma studied him, torn. Her instinct was to refuse. She hated the thought of depending on anyone. But the truth pressed cold against her chest. The moment she thought of Frank, her hands trembled. "Fine," she said at last, barely above a whisper, "but only for a few days." "Just a few days," Sam repeated, his voice soft as a promise. The road to the ranch wound through misty hills. The pines stood tall and sparse, their needles brittle in the wind. Patches of frost glimmered on the stream's edge as Sam drove slowly, the truck tires humming against the damp road. Beside him, Emma sat quietly, eyes fixed on the landscape changing color under the chill. She had thought she was used to solitude, yet now, with only the sound of the engine and the faint rhythm of his breathing beside her, her heart was beating faster than it should. "How far is your ranch from town?" "About 10 miles, Sam replied, "far enough to forget the world." "You like being alone?" "At first I thought I did. Turns out I was just hiding." She nodded lightly. "I know that feeling." "You do?" "The need to keep people from seeing you weak." A faint smile tugged at his lips. "Then you understand why I worry about you." They fell silent for a while. The tires hissed over wet gravel. The wind whispered through the trees. The sky grew heavier, scattering the first thin flakes of snow, fragile, white as ash. Emma sighed, watching them melt against the window. "You're right. Staying alone was foolish, but staying in the house of a lonely man, that's not exactly wise either." Sam chuckled. "I promised to behave like a gentleman." "And I promise not to believe that," she said, half teasing, half serious. The air between them lightened, until her next words made him nearly lose control of the steering wheel. "If you really want to help me," she said quietly, "marry me." Sam hit the brakes. The truck skidded slightly before stopping on the frosty road. He turned to her, eyes wide. "What did you just say?" Emma remained perfectly calm, as if she'd suggested something entirely ordinary. "Marry me." A fake marriage. He stared at her, certain he'd misheard. "You can't be serious." "I am. If I'm married, the bank can't repossess the house while the ownership transfer is under review. And Frank wouldn't dare harass a married woman. As for you," her eyes met his, steady, clear, "you'd have some company at the ranch, at least until winter's over." For a few long seconds, Sam could only stare at her. Then he gave a short, disbelieving laugh, one with no trace of amusement. "That's the strangest proposal I've ever heard. So what's your answer?" "No." The word came sharp, immediate. Emma blinked. You didn't even think about it. No need to. I don't marry someone to solve a legal problem. She turned her head toward the window, her voice calm, almost too calm. I'm not asking you to love me, Sam. I'm asking for a deal. And I don't make deals anymore. His tone roughened, old wounds flickering beneath it. I lost myself once to contracts. I'm not signing another one, even if it's called marriage. Silence fell heavy in the cab. The wind roared outside. Snow thickened, blurring the road ahead. Sam drove on, eyes fixed on the fading horizon, anger simmering in his chest. He wasn't sure who he was mad at, her for suggesting something so absurd, or himself for caring enough to be shaken by it. By the time they reached the ranch, the sun had already slipped behind the mountains. The log house stood warm and solid amid drifting flakes, golden light spilling from the stable where the horses stirred at the sound of the engine. Sam shut off the truck and sat for a moment, hands still on the wheel. Emma turned to him, her expression quiet but resolute. I know what you're thinking, she said softly, but sometimes people use the strangest logic just to protect the simplest thing. A home. He didn't answer. His eyes followed the snowfall outside, each flake landing softly on the frozen earth. When she opened the door and stepped out, he finally spoke, the words escaping him before he could stop them. Emma, I'm not very good at telling you no. She smiled faintly, then turned away, her boots leaving small prints across the untouched snow. That night, Sam couldn't sleep. He sat by the window, watching the pale expanse outside the ranch. The first snow of the season covered everything, fields, fences, even the roof of the old barn. The light above the stable flickered, casting a soft amber glow over the wooden walls. And in that stillness, he realized something. Every argument he'd made was right. Every boundary he'd drawn was reasonable. Yet his heart refused to obey, because deep beneath the quiet and the loneliness, where once there had been only wind and memory, there was now the sound of another heartbeat, another pair of footsteps echoing in the cold. And no matter how impossible her reasons were, he couldn't imagine going back to the silence that came before her. The first morning at the ranch began with the sound of horses and the scent of freshly brewed coffee. Winter sunlight streamed through the window, painting golden stripes across the wooden floor. Sam had been up before dawn. Old habits. Feeding the horses always came first. When he returned to the house, Emma was already in the kitchen, her hair tied neatly at the nape of her neck, a dusting of flour on the white apron she wore. You know your pantry only contains coffee and dried meat, right? She said without turning. Sam leaned against the doorframe, arms folded, a small smile playing on his lips. I live alone. No one's ever complained about the menu. Well, someone just did, she replied, glancing back at him with a teasing grin before turning the eggs in the pan. The smell of melting butter mixed with coffee filled the room, warming the air. Sam stood watching her for a while, the way she moved, quick but calm, as if she belonged there. He didn't say it, but something inside him softened. Something that hadn't stirred in years, since long before his world had fallen apart. After breakfast, Emma rolled up her sleeves and began cleaning. The Reed Ranch had once been a bustling place, but since Sam's departure from San Francisco, he'd let most of it fall into quiet neglect. Dust coated the hallways, curtains hung thin and frayed, and family portraits leaned crooked on the walls. You kept everything exactly the same, Emma murmured, running a cloth over the worn picture frames. From across the room where he was checking a bridle, Sam answered, Didn't see the point in changing anything. After losing everything, you learn that sometimes touching the past only breaks it further. She didn't respond. Her fingers brushed over a photograph of a middle-aged man in a dark suit, stern, proud, standing beside a much younger Sam. He looks strong, she said softly. He taught me never to bow my head, Sam said, pausing, but he forgot to teach me how to stand up after I fall. Emma turned to him, her voice gentle. Then maybe it's time someone reminded you. Their eyes met, for just a moment, still and quiet, but in that silence they recognized something mirrored. Two people who'd both learned the hard way how to survive their own loneliness. That afternoon, Emma followed him to the stables. The sky was clear, the ground dusted with a thin layer of snow. Under the pale winter light, The horses gleamed like moving shadows on a white canvas. Sam handed her a bucket of hay. Don't stand too close. They spook easily. Emma smiled faintly. I know. Horses sense emotions better than people do. Maybe better than men. Sam chuckled, a sound that broke through the stillness. I'll pretend I'm not offended. She threw him a playful look and stepped toward a chestnut mare, extending her hand carefully. The horse snorted once, then settled, leaning into her touch. See? Emma said with quiet triumph. I know how to make others trust me. Sam leaned against the fence, watching her. You're better at this than I expected. And you, she countered, are kinder than you pretend to be. The comment silenced him. His eyes drifted to the distant ridge, snow gathering thick along its edge. I'm not kind, Emma. I'm just trying to fix something, though I'm not sure for whom anymore. Maybe for yourself, she said softly. The days that followed unfolded in gentle rhythm. In the mornings, they led the horses to the pasture, mended fences, and kindled fires in the stables. By noon, Emma cooked, sometimes stew, sometimes soup, sometimes just bread and coffee. But whatever she made, Sam finished every bite. You eat like a man who's never known what home tastes like, she teased once. Maybe that's true, he replied, smiling faintly. At night, when the horses were quiet and the frost crept against the windows, they sat by the fireplace. Emma read. Sam tinkered with old harnesses or scribbled notes about the livestock. The wind hissed through the eaves, but inside there was only the crackle of firewood and sometimes the soft sound of Emma laughing at something on the page. Little by little, the silence between them changed shape. It was no longer a wall. It became a language. One evening, Emma stood on the porch watching snow drift down over the open fields. The world was hushed and white, save for the distant glow of the stable lantern. Sam stepped beside her, holding out a steaming mug of cocoa. Thanks, she said, shivering slightly. The horses are all in for the night, he said. You know, they sleep standing up. Instinct. Always half ready to run. Guess people aren't so different. She glanced at him, her breath visible in the cold air. Are you talking about me or about yourself? He smiled faintly and didn't answer. He stood beside her, shoulders almost brushing. This place, Emma whispered, it isn't as lonely as I thought. It's peaceful. Makes me want to stay a little longer. Then stay, Sam said simply. You don't need a reason. She turned toward him. Under the soft porch light, his face looked calm, strong, but touched by something fragile. The quiet of a man who'd finally stopped running. You know, she said gently, sometimes healing doesn't come from advice. It comes from having someone willing to sit beside you in silence. Sam's lips curved in a quiet smile. I think I'm learning that from you. Night deepened. Inside, the fire burned low. Emma fell asleep with a book open across her lap, while Sam dozed off in the chair, pen still between his fingers. Smiling, she rose, took a blanket, and draped it softly over his shoulders. Outside, snow continued to fall, silent, steady, covering the ranch in a stillness that felt, for the first time in years, like peace. A week had passed since the first snowfall. Whispering pines lay under a white shroud so still that even the wind could be heard threading softly through the pine branches. Inside the wooden house, a soft light brushed across Emma's face as she folded the blanket on the chair and neatly packed away the few things she had grown used to during her stay at the ranch. She knew she couldn't stay forever. This place, with its gentle horses and whispering wind, had given her the calmest days she'd ever known. But peace was never meant to be hiding, and Frank Tillman, that shadow lurking behind every door, still existed somewhere beyond the snow. That morning she found Sam in the stable. He was brushing the black stallion, his tall frame steady and silent, a man shaped by the mountains themselves. Sam, she said quietly, I've made up my mind. I'm going to the police. I'm pressing charges against Frank. He lifted his gaze to hers, the lines around his eyes deepening. You're sure? It won't be easy. The longer I hide, the more he wins, she said, her voice steady but trembling beneath. I'm tired of being afraid. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. All right. I'll take you. The old pickup rumbled down the misty road, tires crunching softly over frozen gravel. Neither of them spoke. Only the hum of the engine filled the quiet. Before reaching town, Sam slowed to a stop at a crossroads. "I need to stop by the bank," he said. "You go to the inn first, pack what you need. I'll come for you after." Emma nodded. "All right. It won't take me long." He waited until she stepped out at Perkins' Inn, watching through the windshield as her silhouette disappeared behind the familiar curtains. Then he turned the truck toward the town center, where Whispering Pines Bank gleamed faintly beneath the pale winter sun. Inside the bank office, the manager looked startled as Sam placed a check on his desk. "Are you sure, Mr. Reed? This is enough to clear the entire Whitaker loan." Sam simply nodded. "Transfer it immediately. And I want written proof of the debt release today." The manager adjusted his glasses, studying him with mild awe. "That's a rare act of generosity, sir." "No," Sam replied, his voice low and even. "It's just the right thing to do." When he signed the confirmation, a strange calm settled over him, like closing the final page of an old chapter and opening the first of something uncharted. Not just for her, but for himself. By afternoon, Emma had finished packing. In her small room at the inn, Mrs. Perkins leaned against the doorway, watching as Emma folded her worn brown coat. "You're really leaving, dear?" she asked, voice full of concern. "Yes," Emma said softly, smiling faintly. "It's time I stand up for myself." Mrs. Perkins nodded slowly, her expression warm and wise. "Sam Reed's a good man. You know that, right?" Emma froze for a moment, then whispered, "And that's exactly what scares me most." Dusk had fallen when Sam returned. The truck pulled up in front of the town's small police station, its neon sign casting a bluish glow over the snow. Emma took a deep breath and stepped out. "You sure you don't want me to come with you?" he asked. "No, I have to say it myself." She paused, looking at him. "But stay close, will you?" He gave a single nod. "Always." Inside, Emma placed a folded report on Sheriff Dawson's desk. Her hands trembled, but her voice did not. "I'm here to file a complaint against Frank Tillman. He broke into my home, threatened me, and destroyed my property. I won't stay silent anymore." Dawson looked at her with newfound respect. "You're doing the right thing, Emma." He signed the intake form and handed her a copy. "We'll start the investigation right away." "Do you have anyone with you?" She turned toward the window. Sam was standing outside, leaning against his truck, hands in his jacket pockets, the street light glinting off his dark hair. "Yes," she said with a quiet smile. "I do." When she stepped back out, Sam handed her a folded paper stamped with the bank's red seal. "What's this?" she asked, frowning. "The official debt release," he said simply. "Your father's loan, paid in full. The house is yours now. No bank, no Frank. You're free, Emma." She stared at the paper, stunned. Her breath caught as the cold air misted around them. "You did this? Why?" Sam met her eyes. The lamplight reflected in them, two steady golden embers. "Because I want to marry you." For a heartbeat, everything froze. The snow fell in soft spirals around them, soundless and unreal. "Marry me," she whispered, disbelief trembling through her words. "Not to save you," Sam said, his voice low but unwavering. "Not to repay kindness or to fight Frank. I'm doing this because I need you, Emma. Here, in my life." She stood motionless, lips parted, her pulse quickening. Gratitude, fear, and something far warmer tangled inside her chest until she couldn't tell one from the other. "You're insane," she murmured, eyes glistening. "You said you didn't want to save anyone, and now you're doing exactly that." "No," Sam said softly, stepping closer. "This time, I'm not saving anyone. I'm holding on to the one person who made me believe in life again." Snow thickened around them, layering their shoulders in white. Emma looked up at him for a long moment, eyes uncertain yet softening with every second. She brushed her fingers over the paper in her hand, as if to be sure it was real. "You paid off my debt, and now you're offering a proposal in return?" Sam shook his head gently. "Not a bargain, Emma. A beginning. If you say no, the house is still yours. But if you say yes," he let out a faint, nervous smile, Then maybe I'll finally believe my life didn't go entirely wrong. The wind carried the scent of fresh snow and pine smoke between them. Emma lowered her head, tears spilling as she smiled faintly. You have no idea what you're doing, Sam Reed. Maybe not, he said quietly, but for the first time, I want to believe in something that doesn't make sense. Under the falling snow of a small mountain town, two people who had spent years running from the world now stood side by side, without grand promises, without certainty, only faith. The paper in Emma's trembling hands fluttered in the wind, a symbol of a debt erased, and of a heart that, at last, was ready to belong to someone. That morning, Whispering Pines was bathed in pale golden light. The snow from the night before had melted, revealing fresh green shoots beneath the tall pine trees. Church bells chimed across the clear air, blending with the chirping of birds and the faint scent of pine resin drifting on the breeze. In the small room behind the church, Emma stood before a mirror. Her dress was simple, a soft shade of sky blue, the one Mrs. Perkins had helped her alter the night before. It wasn't expensive or grand, but when she slipped it on, it felt like she was wearing a piece of spring itself. In her hands was a small bouquet of wildflowers, white daisies, lavender, and sprigs of green grass, all gathered from the hillside behind the ranch. You've never looked more beautiful, Emma, Mrs. Perkins said, her voice trembling as she pinned a pearl clip in Emma's hair. Sam Reed is a lucky man. Emma smiled, her cheeks tinged pink. I don't know if lucky is the right word, she said softly, but I do know I'm at peace. Outside, laughter and conversation floated through the open windows. The townsfolk had gathered in the churchyard, people who had known Emma as the quiet school teacher, now here to celebrate her as a friend. No one questioned how quickly it had all happened. Perhaps they understood. Some things didn't need explaining when the truth was written so clearly in two people's eyes. Under the largest pine near the church gate, Sam stood waiting. A simple wooden arch, draped with white fabric, framed the scene. He wore a white shirt and a gray vest, his dark hair neatly combed. The breeze stirred through the trees, and for a fleeting moment, he felt time slow. Every loss, every betrayal, every victory and ruin in his past seemed to have led him to this one quiet, golden morning. When Emma stepped into view, the crowd fell silent. She walked down the petal-strewn path, sunlight glinting through the pine branches, turning her hair to strands of honey. Sam forgot to breathe. She wasn't beautiful because of the dress, but because of her smile, the serene, brave smile of someone who had suffered, endured, and still believed in love. When she reached him, she teased gently, You're looking at me like you're not sure this is real. I'm not, Sam admitted, voice thick, but I know I'll never forget it. The ceremony was simple, but heartfelt. The pastor spoke of grace, of two people who had walked through pain and found each other on the other side. The wind whispered softly through the pines like a hymn only nature knew. When it came time for the rings, Sam reached into his vest pocket and produced a small box. Inside was a slender gold band with a tiny diamond that caught the sunlight. Emma's eyes widened. Sam, you didn't have to. He cut her off with a quiet smile. I wanted to. Not because it's expensive, but because you deserve something real, something that lasts, like the way you made me believe in myself again. His voice was steady, yet so honest that even the crowd fell silent. Emma bit her lip as tears slipped down her cheek when he slid the ring onto her finger. And do you, Emma, the pastor asked, promise to walk beside him through sunlight and storm, through health and hardship, in plenty and in want? She looked up at Sam through her tears, smiling. I do, because with him I've found the place I can finally rest. The pastor nodded, his voice warm and sure. Then I pronounce you husband and wife. May peace dwell wherever you go. Sam leaned forward and kissed her forehead, a gentle, trembling kiss that felt more sacred than any vow. Applause erupted through the crowd. Mrs. Perkins dabbed her eyes with a lace handkerchief, half laughing, half crying. Well, she sniffed, someone's finally managed to pull that man out of the shadows. Laughter rippled through the guests, light as sunlight through pine needles. The celebration took place right under the trees. Long wooden tables draped with white cloths, jars of wildflowers as centerpieces, homemade pies, and Mrs. Perkins's apple cider. The entire town was there. The blacksmith, the baker, the banker, even Sheriff Dawson, who raised his glass with a grin. "Never seen Sam Reed smile this much in my life," Dawson said. "If that ain't love, folks, it's a miracle." Emma blushed. Sam just chuckled, squeezing her hand beneath the table. "No miracle," he said quietly. "Just the right person." The sun dipped behind the mountains, casting golden light across the clearing. When the first song began to play, Sam stood and offered his hand. "May I have this dance, Mrs. Reed?" Emma laughed, slipping her hand into his. "That still sounds strange," she said softly, "but I think I could get used to it." They danced beneath the pines as twilight deepened, snowflakes drifting gently like white petals. There were no fireworks, no grandeur, only the soft hush of wind, the scent of pine, and the warmth of two hearts that had finally found their way home. Later, when everyone had gone, Emma stood alone beneath the trees where they'd said their vows. Sam walked up behind her and draped his coat over her shoulders. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded, gazing up at the starlit sky. "Can you hear it?" "The wind in the pines. It sounds like singing." He smiled, wrapping an arm around her. "I hear it. It's the song of people who've stopped running." Emma rested her head against his shoulder. Under the quiet forest canopy, their silhouettes merged into one, and in that peaceful stillness, unspoken but certain, was a promise. From now on, peace would no longer be a place to hide. It would be the place they called home. The next morning, the sky over Whispering Pines was so clear that even the faintest clouds drifted lazily above the distant ridges. Sam's pickup waited in front of the old house, the truck bed loaded with a few boxes of books, some small belongings, and a ceramic vase Emma had insisted on bringing. "It's been through enough loneliness," she'd said. "It deserves a place in the new home." She stood at the doorway, taking one last look at the wooden house she had lived in for so many years. The cracked walls, the peeling window frames, the small kitchen table that had witnessed her sleepless nights over debts and doubts. Everything was quiet now, as if the past had finally fallen into peace. "I've lived here for years," she whispered, her gaze still on the last window, "but I never really saw it as home." Then she turned to Sam, eyes full of calm. "But that place, as long as you're there, that's home." Sam didn't answer. He only stepped beside her, resting a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Then let's go home." The road out of Whispering Pines curved gently through hills where the snow was melting into streams. The first spring sunlight spread over the dry grass, tinting the landscape gold. When the truck rolled down into the valley, Emma cracked the window open, letting the cool air pour in, crisp with the scent of pine and wet earth. It smelled like a beginning. At the end of the road, Reed Ranch came into view, modest but alive. The stable stood by the slope, smoke curled from the stone chimney, and far off the horses grazed lazily across the field. Emma stepped out, breathing deep. "It's so quiet you can hear the wind breathe." Sam smiled. "You'll get used to it. Out here, every sound is a hello." She smiled back. "Then hello, new Whispering Pines." Their first days together were like a simple, unhurried melody. In the mornings, Sam rose early to the stable while Emma started the fire, brewed coffee, and made breakfast. Eggs and toast, nothing fancy. Afterward, she joined him outside, learning how to feed and groom the horses, how to ride. At first, she was clumsy, almost falling off each time the horse picked up speed. Sam laughed, steadying her by the waist. "The trick is not to control it," he said. "You have to trust it." Breathing hard, she gave him a look. "Trust the horse or trust the man laughing at me?" He chuckled. "Both." Little by little, she found her rhythm. Their laughter echoed across the fields, mingling with the wind and the scent of new grass. In the evenings, they cleaned the barn, lit the fire, and ate dinner on the porch. Emma told stories about her students, the kids with torn boots and bright smiles. Sam told her about San Francisco, about the glass towers where he'd once thought money could buy everything, until he realized the one thing he needed most would never fit in a bank account. Once she asked softly, "If you could go back, would you change anything?" He paused for a long moment, then said, "Yes. I'd stop sooner, before I missed you." She smiled, eyes glowing in the firelight. "Good thing you didn't miss me for long." Time passed, and life on the ranch began to take on the shape of their shared dreams. Emma built a small room next to the main house, a wooden desk, a chalkboard, and a hand-drawn sign written in white chalk. Reed Valley Learning Room, where dreams begin. At first, only 4 children from nearby farms came to study, then 6, then 10. Soon, laughter filled the valley every morning, the sound of pencils scratching blending with the chirping of sparrows. From the porch, Sam watched her through the steam of his coffee, his expression soft. The place that had once been his refuge had become something more, a place of hope, not just for him, but for everyone it touched. 2 years later, Reed Ranch had changed. The old house had grown, a larger classroom with bright windows and shelves packed with books. In the yard, children ran and played, their laughter stretching all the way to the pine line. Frank Tillman, the man who had once terrorized them, was now behind bars. The town whispered that justice might come late, but it never truly lost its way. Inside the small valley home, Sam and Emma were living out their quiet miracle. Emma sat on the porch with their little boy James, barely 2, perched on her lap. Sam was nearby, repairing an old saddle under the orange wash of the sunset. Golden dust shimmered in the air, drifting over the porch and the lavender-scented breeze. "I thought you were just going to town for coffee and nails," she teased. He looked up, a smile tugging at his lips. "And I came back with an entire life." She closed the book in her lap and tilted her head against his shoulder. "If someone told you that night would lead you here, I'd have believed them," he said simply. Their son babbled, calling out, "Pa," from the yard, while inside the smell of freshly baked apple pie filled the house. The sunset deepened, spilling gold across the porch, wrapping the house in a warmth that felt like the world's gentlest promise.